Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive, this time into the world of American versus British English.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, and we're going to go beyond just the basic, the stereotypical stuff that you always hear about.
Right.
And really kind of dig into like the subtle, the sneaky little differences that even trip up like advanced English speakers.
I know, because I'm one of them.
Yeah, like even, people who are like, very, very fluent in both. But there's still some little things that are like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So we've got 15 words and phrases
Okay.
to guide you through these sort of tricky transatlantic conversations. And trust me, you will be surprised by some of these things.
I'm ready to be surprised.
Okay, good. So what I think is interesting is that it's not just like vocabulary swaps. It's like it kind of gives you a peek into the history and the culture and even the humor of both countries.
Absolutely. Yeah. They really do reflect those deep cultural differences and sometimes even values.
Yeah, like almost like a window into like a different mindset.
Exactly.
So let's jump right in with our first word. It's one that's kind of been popping up a lot lately in both American and British English, but with a slightly different vibe. And that word is
Bespoke.
bespoke.
Yeah. You've probably seen it like in marketing materials and stuff, but how does it actually differ across the pond?
Well, in both American and British English, it basically means the same thing, which is custom made, made for a particular customer.
Right.
But in the U.S., at least, it still kind of has that connotation of something really exclusive associated with like luxury goods and services.
So like a bespoke suit or like
a bespoke suit, a bespoke car.
Right, like a Rolls Royce or something?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So it still signals like luxury prestige and really that attention to detail.
It's like it's become a marketing word almost.
It has.
Yeah.
It has. And it's becoming more common.
Right.
But it still has that sense of like, this is special.
Yeah. This is not just off the rack. This is something really unique. Whereas in British English, it's much more commonplace.
Interesting.
You can use it for anything that's customized, whether it's a wedding dress, kitchen cabinets, you name it. Our source even gives the example. She ordered a bespoke wedding dress from a designer in London.
Wow. Yeah. So it doesn't have that luxury kind of vibe to it.
Not so much. It's just like, I had this made for me.
Yeah.
Just for me.
Interesting. Okay. So the same word can have these subtle like shades of meaning depending on, where you are in the world.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. I like that.
It's fascinating, and it makes you realize how much context matters when you're communicating.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit to a word that I think often trips people up. And this is like the classic queue versus line dilemma.
Ah, yes, the great transatlantic queue debate.
Right.
One of those fundamental differences that just seems so simple, but they reveal so much about those cultural perspectives.
Right.
So in the U.S., you stand in line, which to me kind of implies a more individualistic approach, like everyone's just focused on their own thing, getting it done. Whereas in the U.K., you queue, and that suggests orderliness.
Right.
Shared social etiquette, like we're all in this together. We're all going to wait patiently for our turn.
And it's almost like a cultural institution in Britain, the concept of queuing.
Absolutely. It is. It's deeply ingrained in British society. You queue at the bus stop, you queue at the grocery store.
Right.
You even queue at the pub.
Yeah, you better queue up.
Yeah, and there's an unspoken understanding that you wait your turn. It's just part of their social fabric.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, is that reflected in other aspects of British life? Is that that whole like sense of order and politeness and
for sure.
Yeah. Very interesting. Okay, let's move on to a word that describes a feeling we all know too well, but express it differently. Utter exhaustion. So in American English, we might say exhausted, but our British friends have a wonderfully evocative word for this, and that word is knackered.
Knackered. Oh, yeah. I love that word.
It's a good one, isn't it?
It is. It's so descriptive. It goes beyond just being tired.
Yeah.
It really conveys that sense of being completely drained, worn out.
Right, like you've just hit a wall.
You've hit a wall, you're done. Yeah. And while Americans might use exhausted in a similar way, knackered has this playfulness to it. Like almost like they're poking fun at their own fatigue.
Right.
Which is very British.
Yeah, it's a good one. And our source uses the example, I'm absolutely knackered after working a double shift.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think perfectly captures that.
It does.
But I'm curious, do you think that playful tone is like a way of downplaying the severity of it?
Possibly. Yeah, it could be like a coping mechanism.
Right.
Like make light of a difficult situation, which, as we've said, is very British.
Yeah, very British for sure. Okay, ready for our next word.
Hit me.
Okay. So this is a word that is a bit of a chameleon. It changes its meaning depending on which side of the pond you're on, and that word is fancy. Fancy, yeah, so in American English, fancy typically means, something elaborate.
Right.
Or upscale, like a fancy dinner or a fancy hotel.
Fancy restaurant. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But in British English, it takes on a whole other meaning.
It does. It has like a secret double life.
Right.
It means to want or to like something. So you might ask a British friend, do you fancy a cuppa?
Do you fancy a cuppa?
Which means, would you like a cup of tea?
Right.
So simple question, but a very different meaning.
Yeah, I'd say yes to that any day of the week.
Exactly.
A cuppa. Okay, on to our next word, another one that showcases the British love for expressive language. This one is chuffed. Chuffed.
Love it.
It's a good one.
Yep.
A good one.
Yep.
It expresses a feeling of great delight or satisfaction.
Yeah, it goes beyond just being pleased.
Right.
It's like absolutely thrilled, over the moon, delighted.
So it's like pleased on steroids.
You could say that, yes, if your British friend says, I'm chuffed to bits about your new job, they're not just happy for you, they're ecstatic.
Yeah, they're like really, really happy for you.
Really, really happy.
Yeah. It's like, I love that it's such a specific word.
It is.
For that very specific emotion.
Yeah, it captures that feeling of pure joy.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk a little bit about some seasonal vocabulary. When those leaves start changing color, and Americans call it fall.
Our British friends call it autumn.
Autumn. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always found it interesting how those different words evoke different images in my mind.
Right.
Fall feels more crisp.
Yeah.
And dynamic, like the leaves are like actively falling.
Yeah.
Whereas autumn has a more mellow, kind of wistful feel to it.
More romantic, maybe.
Yeah. It's really interesting how these subtle differences in wording can like shape our perceptions of the world around us.
Absolutely. It really highlights how language can influence our thoughts and even our emotions.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's explore how Americans and Brits measure time.
Okay.
What do you got for me on this one?
Well, this is a fun one. In British English, they use the word fortnight to denote 2 weeks.
A fortnight.
Yeah. Whereas Americans would simply say 2 weeks.
Right.
Fortnight sounds a little old-fashioned.
Yeah, it does a little bit more literary almost.
Right.
Or historical.
Yeah.
But it's still quite common in British English.
I kind of like it.
Yeah, it's got a charm to it.
Yeah, like a little nod to a bygone era.
Absolutely.
It's cool. Okay. Let's talk about another area where we see these transatlantic differences, and that is taking a break from work or school.
Okay.
So, Americans go on vacation.
The British go on holiday.
Holiday. Right? Same concept, different word. But it's interesting, this distinction kind of highlights how language evolves. Both words, vacation and holiday, have Latin roots.
Right.
But they've kind of taken on slightly different meanings over time.
They've each gone on their own little linguistic journey.
Yeah.
Reflecting the cultural nuances of their respective countries.
Right. Like the evolution of language.
Exactly. Okay, now we're going to step into a potential minefield of misunderstanding. This is all about wardrobe essentials. What Americans call pants.
The British call trousers.
Trousers. But here's where things get really interesting.
Yes.
In British English, pants typically refer to underwear. So a simple statement like, I need new pants.
Could lead to some very awkward situations.
Oh my God.
If you're talking to someone from the UK.
Like, so you're in London, you're like, I need some new pants. And they're like,
you're looking at you like, what?
Oh.
Yeah. You want to buy new underwear right now?
Like,
so be careful with that one.
Be very, very careful.
Stick with trousers if you want to avoid any awkwardness.
Okay, trousers. Got it. Speaking of potentially embarrassing mix-ups, our next word is one that I think Americans need to be extra careful with, and that word is rubber. Now, in British English, this is a simple word. It means an eraser. That thing you use to rub out pencil marks?
Right.
But in American English, rubber has a completely different meaning.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And it's not something we're going to discuss on this show, but...
we'll let your imagination run wild.
Yeah.
But suffice it to say, it's best to stick with eraser to avoid any red faces.
Yes, stick with eraser. Americans, be very, very careful.
Yes.
Our source really emphasizes this. They're like, warning.
Yeah.
Okay, shifting gears a little bit to places of healing, what we call in American English. A doctor's office in British English is often called a surgery.
A surgery?
A surgery. But here's where things can get a little tricky.
They can.
because in British English, surgery can also refer to the consultation hours at a doctor's office. So you might hear someone say, I'm going to the surgery at 9 a.m. for a checkup.
Right.
And that doesn't necessarily mean they're having a medical procedure.
No, it just means they're going to see their doctor.
Right.
During their consultation time.
Got it.
So again, context is everything.
Yeah.
When it comes to language.
Right. Very, very true. Okay, let's move on to a mode of transportation that helps us conquer those tall buildings. Americans take the elevator.
The British hop in the lift.
The lift, two different words, same vertical journey.
Exactly.
And, this difference, I think, goes way back to the early days of these contraptions. Elevator, with its emphasis on lifting, kind of reflects that American focus on functionality.
Yeah.
Whereas lift, with the more simpler, elegant sound, might reflect a British appreciation for understated design.
It's a fascinating thought, isn't it?
It is like the words themselves.
Yeah.
Kind of give you a clue.
They do.
Okay, ready for another housing showdown?
I am.
Okay, in American English, we live in apartments.
Our British counterparts reside in flats.
The flats. So both words paint a picture of, like, a self-contained living space within a larger building.
Right, yeah.
But they do conjure up kind of different images.
They do, don't they?
Like apartment to me feels more modern and spacious.
Modern, spacious, maybe even a little bit luxurious.
Right.
Whereas a flat feels cozier, more intimate.
Right.
Maybe even a little bit quirky.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
So apartment might be like a sleek high-rise.
Exactly.
And a flat might be like, charming,
yeah,
older building with character. A
little more character, yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing how these words can carry such nuanced cultural baggage.
They do. It's fascinating.
It is. Okay, speaking of nuanced cultural baggage, let's talk about entertainment.
Okay.
So Americans go to the cinema to watch a movie.
In British English, they go to the cinema to see a film.
A film.
2 words.
Same cinematic experience, but again, they reflect a little bit of a different perspective.
Right.
Like movie emphasizes movement, action. The spectacle of it all.
The entertainment.
Yeah. Whereas film kind of highlights the artistry, the craft.
The medium itself.
Yeah. Like movie is more about the entertainment value.
Right.
And film is more like it's elevated to an art form.
Exactly. And that distinction really speaks volumes about how Americans and Brits approach cinema in general.
It really does. It's really interesting. Okay, last but not least, let's talk about food.
Okay.
When we're craving that restaurant meal,
yeah,
but we don't feel like dining in,
right,
Americans order takeout.
The British go for takeaway.
Takeaway. And here's where things can get a little tricky again, because in British English, takeaway can refer to both the food itself and the restaurant that provides it.
Yes.
So you might hear someone say, let's get Indian takeaway. And that could mean either ordering food or going to an Indian takeaway restaurant.
Exactly.
So again,
context
is everything you got to pay attention to those subtle cues in British English to make sure you're on the same page.
Right.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive, from bespoke suits to knackered Brits. We've explored some really interesting differences between American and British English, uncovering these hidden layers of history, culture, and humor along the way. And I think it's been fascinating to see how those differences can sometimes lead to miscommunication.
Absolutely.
Or at least a little bit of confusion, but it also makes the learning process all the more interesting.
You've done an excellent job of not just identifying these differences, but also analyzing what they reveal about the two cultures.
Well, I've had a wonderful guide, but we're not done yet.
No, we are not.
There are still more linguistic gems to uncover.
Yes.
So buckle up. Get ready for part 2, where we delve into even more fascinating distinctions, including some surprising transatlantic twists on everyday words and phrases.
It's going to be good.
It's going to be good.
You won't want to miss it.
Stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive into the wonderfully quirky world of American versus British English.
And I think you'll find these next few examples particularly intriguing.
Oh, good.
We're going to delve into some everyday words and phrases that take on surprisingly different meanings across the Atlantic.
Okay, hit me with those linguistic curveballs.
Yeah.
What's first on our list?
Let's start with something we all do every day walk in American English. We use the sidewalk to get from point A to point B.
But in British English, they stroll along the pavement.
Same concrete path, different terminology.
Right.
And this seemingly simple distinction actually reveals a lot about cultural perspectives in the U.S. The emphasis is on the side as if it's an addition to the road, almost an afterthought.
Right.
But in the UK, the pavement is the main focus, the designated space for pedestrians.
That's a really interesting observation. It makes you wonder if that difference in terminology reflects a broader difference in how pedestrians are viewed or treated in both countries.
It's definitely something to ponder. Okay, let's move on to something that's near and dear to all of us, food, specifically those sweet treats that bring us joy in American English. We indulge in cookies.
While our British friends savor biscuits.
Now, this is where things can get a bit tricky because what Americans call biscuits are more like what the British would call scones.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It's a classic case of a transatlantic word swap.
And a potentially confusing one. Especially if you're craving a chewy chocolate chip cookie and end up with a crumbly, buttery scone. Instead, talk about a culinary disappointment.
I know, right? A total letdown. Speaking of potential disappointments, let's move on to another food-related distinction that often causes confusion snacks when we're feeling peckish and want a quick bite. Americans reach for chips.
While the British opt for crisps.
And to make things even more interesting, what Americans call French fries, the British call chips.
That's a total chip swap.
It is, and one that can lead to some amusing misunderstandings, especially when ordering food at a restaurant.
Right. Imagine asking for chips in London, expecting a side of fries, only to be served a bag of what you'd call potato chips.
Exactly, or vice versa.
Oh, man.
It's a good reminder that even seemingly simple words can have very different meanings depending on where you are in the world.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's shift gears and talk about something a bit more practical transportation in American English. We fill up our cars with gas.
While in British English, they top up with petrol.
Same fuel, different terminology.
And this distinction is particularly important if you're ever driving in a foreign country and need to find a petrol station.
Right.
You don't want to end up stranded with an empty tank because you used the wrong word.
That would not be good.
No, not at all. Speaking of transportation, let's talk about those iconic red buses that grace the streets of London. In American English, we'd simply call them buses.
But in British English, they're often referred to as coaches.
Now, this is where things can get a bit confusing because in American English, a coach typically refers to a long-distance bus or a private bus used for tours or sporting events.
Right. Like a tour bus.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you're in London and someone tells you to catch the coach, they're probably not talking about a luxury tour bus.
Right.
They simply mean to hop on the regular city bus.
Got it. It's all about context.
It is, and it's a reminder that even seemingly straightforward words can have multiple meanings depending on the region and situation.
Okay, let's move on to a topic that's near and dear to my heart. Books. When we finish reading a book, Americans typically return it to the library.
While in British English, they take it back to the library.
It's a subtle difference, but I find it fascinating because it highlights how even simple verbs can vary across regions.
And those subtle variations can sometimes reveal underlying cultural nuances. For instance, the American emphasis on returning might suggest a sense of ownership as if the book is being given back to its rightful place.
Right.
Whereas the British use of taking back might imply a more transactional approach, as if the book is simply being returned to its point of origin.
Like almost like we borrowed it and now we're taking it back.
Exactly. It's like those different verbs offer a glimpse into the unspoken rules and expectations surrounding books and libraries in both cultures.
That's really thought-provoking.
Yeah.
Okay, let's wrap up this segment with a distinction that's particularly relevant in today's digital age. When we want to find information online, Americans typically use Google to search.
While in British English, they often use Google to look something up.
Again, it's a subtle difference, but it reflects how language adapts to new technologies and cultural practices. Search feels more active and directed, like you're on a mission to find specific information.
Right.
While look something up feels more casual, like you're simply browsing for information or clarifying something you're curious about.
And that distinction might reflect a broader cultural difference in how Americans and Brits approach information gathering. It's fascinating food for thought.
It really is. Well, we've certainly covered a lot of ground in this segment, from sidewalks and cookies to petrol and coaches. We've explored a wide range of American versus British English variations, uncovering hidden layers of cultural meaning and potential pitfalls for the unsuspecting traveler or language enthusiast.
You've done a fantastic job of not only highlighting these differences, but also prompting us to think critically about what they reveal about the two cultures and how they influence our communication.
Well, having you as my expert guide has made this journey both insightful and enjoyable. But our linguistic adventure isn't over yet, is it?
Not quite. We still have more fascinating distinctions to uncover in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, I'm ready. Bring on part 3.
Get ready for some even more intriguing and potentially confusing transatlantic twists on everyday words and phrases. Stay tuned.
All right, welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into American versus British English.
I feel like we've uncovered so many linguistic surprises already.
We have.
But I have a feeling there are still more gems waiting to be discovered.
I think so too. I think so too. So are you ready to wrap up this transatlantic adventure with a bang?
Absolutely. We've explored some fascinating vocabulary variations.
Yep.
But now let's delve into a few more examples that highlight those subtle but significant ways in which American and British English diverge, even in the simplest of actions.
Okay, bring it on. What linguistic mysteries are we unraveling in this final segment?
Well, let's start with something we all do when the temperature drops: bundle up.
Right.
In American English, we put on a sweater when we need an extra layer of warmth.
But in British English, they do in a jumper.
Jumper, same cozy garment, different name.
Right. And that difference in terminology might actually reflect a subtle difference in cultural attitudes toward clothing.
Possibly.
Like sweater emphasizes the practical purpose of the garment, keeping you warm when you sweat.
Right.
But jumper has a more playful, almost whimsical feel to it.
Yeah, like it's meant to make you feel light and bouncy.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
I love that observation. It's amazing how even something as simple as a name for a piece of clothing can reveal these subtle cultural nuances.
It is fascinating, isn't it?
It is. Okay, let's move on to something that's sure to spark some friendly rivalry. The beloved game of soccer.
Oh, yes.
In American English, we call it soccer.
While our friends across the pond simply refer to it as football.
Football. Now, this is a classic example of a transatlantic word swap.
It is.
That often leads to some good-natured teasing.
Absolutely, especially during major sporting events like the World Cup.
Oh, yeah. I can just imagine the banter back and forth.
Oh, yeah.
You call it soccer, we call it football, but we all know who the real fans are.
Exactly, but at the end of the day, we're all united by our love of the game no matter what we call it.
Right.
It's a reminder that even when our words differ, we can still find common ground through shared passion.
Right. Very true. Okay, speaking of common ground, let's tackle another difference that often trips people up: how we talk about time.
Okay.
So in American English, we might say, I have class this afternoon.
While a British person might say, I have class this evening.
And this is where things can get a little tricky, because afternoon and evening don't always have the same boundaries in both varieties of English.
Right.
In general, Americans tend to use afternoon for a broader period of time, extending later into the day than what British English speakers might consider afternoon.
So it's almost like the American afternoon stretches further into the evening hours.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And that can definitely lead to confusion if you're trying to schedule something with someone from the UK.
Definitely always best to clarify to avoid any scheduling mishaps.
Right. A good point. Okay, and speaking of potential mishaps, let's delve into the world of higher education, another area where American and British English use different terms for the same concept. So in American English, we attend college after high school.
While in British English, they go to university.
University, same concept, different terminology.
And this distinction can be important when navigating academic conversations or applying to institutions in different countries.
Right.
Imagine telling a British professor that you're applying to college when they're expecting you to say university.
Oops. Yeah, that could be a little awkward.
A little bit, yeah. So it's all about using the right lingo to fit in and avoid those awkward moments.
Right. Very true. Okay, ready for our final linguistic showdown?
I believe so.
All right. Let's explore how Americans and Brits express that feeling of being overwhelmed with work or commitments.
Okay.
In American English, we might say, I'm slammed.
While a British person might say, I'm snowed under.
Snowed under, both expressions convey that sense of being buried under a heavy workload. But they use different imagery to paint that picture.
They do.
I'm slammed. Kind of evokes a sense of sudden impact.
Yeah, like you've been hit with a ton of bricks all at once.
Right, exactly. Whereas snowed under suggests a more gradual accumulation, like you're slowly being buried beneath a growing pile of tasks.
And those subtle differences in imagery can actually reveal a lot about how Americans and Brits approach work and stress.
That's an interesting thought.
It is fascinating how even the simplest of phrases can offer a glimpse into those deeper cultural patterns.
It really is why we've really gone deep on this journey.
We have.
From sweaters and football to afternoons in universities, we've explored so many fascinating nuances of American versus British English, uncovering these hidden layers of history, culture, and even psychology along the way.
I think it's been a truly enriching exploration.
I agree. I feel like I've gained a whole new level of understanding and appreciation for these two varieties of English.
Me too. It's been fascinating to see how language is more than just a tool for communication. It's a reflection of our cultural values, our historical experiences, and even our individual perspectives on the world.
It really is, and that's what makes the study of language so endlessly fascinating.
Absolutely.
There's always more to discover, more to learn, and more to appreciate.
Always.
So I hope our listeners have enjoyed this deep dive into the wonderfully weird world of American versus British English as much as we have.
I'm sure they have. And remember, the journey of linguistic discovery doesn't end here. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep celebrating the diversity and richness of language in all its forms.
That's great advice. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure. All right, let's dive into some verbs. If you're ready to really boost your everyday English, this beginner lesson plan is pretty amazing. 21 verbs, that's all it takes.
21 essential verbs, yeah.
And before you think, oh no, grammar, it's not like that, we're going to find out what's so interesting about these words we use every day.
Yeah, and the thing is, you probably use them all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Without even realizing it, they're kind of in everything.
It's true. I mean, we don't think about them too much. It's just like, there they are.
This lesson plan, though, it's broken down into 3 parts. Warm up, then all about the verbs themselves, and then practice. I think this is going to make us look at verbs in a totally different way.
Definitely, yeah. Even the warm-up it's pretty clever. It gets you thinking about all the things you do in a day, like all the actions. Yeah. And then you realize how many verbs are really just part of everything. It also kind of hints at how verbs aren't always actions, you know?
Oh, interesting.
They can be about, like, states of being, too. Okay, well, let's look at some of the verbs. We don't have to go through all 21 right now.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I'm curious, what makes these, like, so-called basic verbs so special?
So they picked these 21 because, well, they're kind of the basis of communication. I mean, you can say so much with them, right? They cover like actions and how you feel, what you want, things that come up all the time. Let's take have, for example.
Okay.
You probably think of it as like owning stuff. But there's more to it than that.
Right. Like have lunch.
Exactly.
Or like have a good time. So it's about experiences too.
Yes.
Huh. I never really thought about that before.
And you know, those little differences are what can make English hard to learn sometimes.
Yeah.
Another good one is look versus see.
Okay.
They make a point in the lesson about look, meaning you're trying to see something, and see, meaning you just, notice it with your eyes.
I like that. There is a difference. I noticed the lesson mentions some interesting things about culture too, with verbs like and love.
Oh yeah, for sure. Language isn't just about the words, right?
Right.
It's all tied up with culture and, how people express themselves.
Yeah.
Even what kinds of verbs they use a lot can be different.
So there's a lot more to these simple verbs than you might think.
Definitely.
What about to be? That seems simple. But then there's am and is and are and was and were.
Right. To be is a tricky one because of how it changes. It's so basic, you have to use it to say anything about yourself or the world, but then it changes form all the time. We call that conjugation, by the way.
Okay.
How the verb changes depending on who's doing it or when it happened.
That makes sense. Even though they call these verbs basic, they're not afraid to get into the grammar, which is, probably helpful if you're new to English. So we've talked about a few examples, but I bet you're thinking, how do I actually use these verbs?
That's where the practice part comes in. And it's designed to be really fun.
Yeah.
You're not just going to be doing boring exercises.
Yeah, I was looking at the activities. They look really creative. I saw one where you pretend you're at a store and you have to use the verbs to talk to people.
Right. That's called role-playing. And it's a really good way to practice because you're in a situation.
Right.
And it feels real, but it's safe to try things out. You can use different verbs, try new phrases, and it really helps you get confident. Much better than just like repeating words from a list, don't you think?
Yeah, for sure. I like how they stress that you should use these verbs in your real life too. Write a journal entry, text a friend, anything to get using them.
Right, that's the idea.
Because the more you use them, the more natural it'll feel, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like working out a muscle, but for your language.
I like that. So we've talked about have, look, see, like love, and to be. I'm ready to dig into some more.
Yeah.
What about give? I mean, it seems pretty simple, but is there more to it?
Give is a good one because it doesn't always mean like actually handing something to someone.
Yeah, that's true.
What about give someone advice or give someone a chance?
You're right. It's not like a thing you can hold. It's more like knowledge or an opportunity.
Exactly. And that's what makes language so cool. It can have all these layers of meaning. Like with give, you could be offering help or even like forgiving someone.
It's amazing how these really simple words can mean so many things.
It is.
What about the opposite then? Take.
Oh.
Like that's not always about physically taking something either, is it?
Nope.
Take a break. Take a risk. You could even take someone's word for it.
Exactly. Take is another one that goes way beyond the basic meaning. It can be about accepting something or getting something. And yeah, like you said, you add a preposition and it becomes a whole new phrase.
Oh, that's right. So you can take one word and combine it with others to make a totally different meaning.
Yeah, exactly. It's like each verb is like a little building block. You can make so many different things.
And that's what I love about language. How you can take simple things and put them together to make something really complex.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got have, give, take. Now, what about verbs that are more about how we think and feel? Like think and feel.
Those are big ones.
Right.
For sure.
Because they're how we talk about what's going on inside. Right?
Yeah. With think, you share your ideas, your opinions, that kind of thing. And feel lets you talk about your emotions, how things make you feel.
I've been noticing how much we use those verbs just in everyday conversation. Like, what do you think about this? Or, I feel really happy today.
Right.
They're simple words, but they're how we connect with each other.
It's not just about giving information. It's how we share our experiences with each other, which is, what makes us human, really.
It is. Okay, let's try another group of verbs. How about say, ask, and tell? They all seem to have to do with talking, but what are the differences?
All right. Well, those are important for understanding how we talk to each other. Say is just about making sounds,
Expressing something. Ask means you want to know something or you're requesting something. And tell is like giving information or instructions.
Wow. So even a small difference like that can change a conversation completely.
Yeah.
It's amazing how 3 simple verbs are behind so much of how we talk to each other every day. We say hello, we ask questions, we tell stories. They're like the foundation of conversation, I guess.
That's a good way to put it. They're how we share ideas, argue, entertain each other.
Right.
Without them, you couldn't really communicate that well.
That's true. All right, let's do 2 more. What about try and use? They seem pretty straightforward, but I wonder if you see anything interesting in them.
Well, try is about effort, and possibility. It means you're making an attempt, but you might not succeed. Well, use means you're using something for a purpose, a tool or a skill or even like language itself.
So try is like dipping your toe in and use is like jumping right in.
That's a great way to think about it. Like with use, you've already decided to do something, right?
Exactly.
That's a really good point. It shows how even those small differences in meaning can make a big difference in what you're trying to say.
For sure.
Okay, so we've gone through quite a few of these 21 essential verbs. What do you think someone listening who wants to get better at English should take away from this?
I think the most important thing is that even these basic verbs can do so much.
Yeah.
They're how we communicate, so when you really get them,
you
can say so much more and so much better.
They're like, I don't know, the letters of the alphabet for talking. Once you know those, you can make all kinds of sentences.
That's it. It's not about memorizing a list. It's about knowing how they work in different situations with other words.
Yeah.
And how they can mean different things.
This deep dive has been really eye-opening. I never thought about these simple words so much before. And I like how this lesson makes learning fun.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just rules and exercises. It's like exploring, figuring things out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Language changes all the time, which is what makes it interesting, right?
Right.
So this lesson is about getting involved in learning, try things out, play with the verbs, see what happens.
Speaking of trying things out, I'm still thinking about that store role play.
Yeah.
What a cool way to practice. It's fun. And you actually have to use the verbs.
It puts you right in there, like you're really having a conversation.
Right.
Instead of just repeating words.
I bet that would make them stick in your head too. It's like learning while you shop for, I don't know, shoes or something.
Exactly. And they have other ideas for practicing too, like writing about your day or using them in texts. The main thing is to use them, make them part of how you talk.
So it's not enough to just learn them on their own.
Right.
You got to put them into practice in real life.
That's how they become like automatic. It's like you don't even have to think about them.
Okay, so to wrap up, what's the one big takeaway you'd want our listener to remember?
I'd say even the simplest words have power, and they can be more complicated than you think.
Yeah.
These 21 verbs are just the start, but once you understand them, you're on your way to speaking English really well.
And for all you language lovers out there, here's something to think about. How do those simple verbs change, depending on where you are or who you're talking to? That's something to keep in mind as you learn more and more words. Keep diving deep.